1 week after 9/11, an FBI special agent interviewed a prisoner in a New York City jail.
I walked in and I sat down with him and I said, well, tell me how they did it.
Immediately after the terrorist attacks, authorities placed the prisoner in 24-hour lockdown. For a week, he'd been in total isolation, with no access to TV, radio, or newspapers.
What he laid out was the attack as if he knew every detail of it. It was just kind of eerie.
The prisoner was this man.
My name is Ali Mohamed.
He was Osama bin Laden's spy in America. He worked for and betrayed 3 arms of the US government: the CIA, the US Army, and the FBI. It was an extraordinary triple cross. He paved the way for Al-Qaeda in the United States.
Islam without political domination cannot survive.
He helped bin Laden build the global terror network we know today. How did US authorities fail to connect the dots? How did he pull it off? And where is he now? The story of Ali Mohamed and one of the most twisted roads leading to 9/11 begins here in Cairo. October the 6th, 1981. Egyptian President Anwar Sadat is reviewing troops at a military parade. Suddenly, a group of army officers leaps from a truck. They spray the reviewing stand with gunfire. The Egyptian president, who had made peace with Israel, is assassinated.
The world has lost a great statesman, and mankind has lost a champion of peace.
Egyptian authorities link Sadat's killers to a radical group that will later become known as Egyptian Islamic Jihad, or EIJ. The group's spiritual leader, arrested within days of the murder, is this man, Sheikh Omar Abdel Rahman. He is a blind cleric who by many accounts gave the fatwa, or decree calling for Sadat to be killed. Some Egyptians agree with the blind sheikh and applaud the assassination. One of them is this 29-year-old army major, Ali Abdel Saud Mohammed. At the time of Sadat's murder, Mohammed is far away from Cairo, here at Fort Bragg in North Carolina. He's part of a regular exchange program that sponsors dozens of foreign officers each year. The US Army base is home to the Green Berets, as well as the elite counterterrorism squad known as Delta Force. Mohammed joins the Green Berets in guerrilla warfare exercises. The trim, rock-solid 6'1" Ali is the son of a soldier. He's adventurous and well-educated, fluent in English, French, Arabic, and Hebrew, and he has a degree in psychology. He comes from a middle-class family, but like many Egyptians, he feels alienated by a government he considers corrupt and oppressive. As an officer in the Egyptian Special Forces, he has fought in battles against both Libya and Israel. His language skills have won him choice assignments protecting Egyptian diplomats overseas. He is also a firm believer in radical Islam and the need for a holy war or jihad against the enemies of his religion.
Ali Mohamed was caught up in that whole movement of young Egyptian officers whose loyalty shifted from the Egyptian regime to that of the Muslim Brotherhood and ultimately its derivative, the Egyptian Islamic Jihad.
Mohammed graduates from the Fort Bragg exchange program. And when he returns home, he discovers that the secular regime of the new Egyptian president, Hosni Mubarak, is cracking down on radical Muslims. Ali Mohamed becomes a target. His Egyptian military career will soon be over, but another one, based on jihad, is about to begin.
The ideology of jihad is very appealing to some people, and certainly Ali Mohamed fell in love with that ideology.
It's an ideology that's leading to a rapid rise in terrorism. Beirut, Lebanon, 1983. 2 suicide bombings, one at the US Embassy and a second at the US Marine Barracks at the Beirut airport, kill more than 300 people. Both are believed to be the work of the Iranian-backed terrorist organization, Hezbollah. As a result, President Reagan withdraws the US Marines from Lebanon. Islamic extremists throughout the region celebrate the withdrawal as a sign of American weakness. To address the growing threat, the CIA needs better human intelligence, and the only way to get it is to recruit more locals willing to infiltrate the world of radical Islam. Cairo, 1984. The Egyptian army dismisses Major Ali Mohamed from the military, and despite his reputation as a dangerous radical, he gets a job as a security advisor with the national airline, Egypt Air. Mohamed is now gravitating towards the Egyptian Islamic Jihad. He gets a call from an EIJ leader, a wealthy surgeon who had served 3 years in prison in connection with the Sadat murder, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. Zawahiri offers to test the young man by giving him a surveillance job. The assignment is to scout the Cairo airport and write a detailed report on the best way to hijack a plane there. Mohamed passes the test and clearly impresses Zawahiri. His next mission will be to infiltrate US intelligence. Later that same year, Mohamed appears at the US Embassy in Cairo, where he offers his services as an informant. CIA officials in Cairo are skeptical, and the Egyptians warn them that Ali Mohamed is a radical Muslim. Nevertheless, the Cairo office lets its counterparts around the world know that Ali Mohamed is available for assignments. A response comes back from the CIA in West Germany that it could use a man like Ali. Mohamed now undertakes a mission for the CIA. His assignment is to infiltrate a mosque in Hamburg that has ties to Hezbollah. But Mohamed quickly reveals himself.
Ali goes in and over the course of a week, he lets it be known to the people in the mosque that he's actually been sent there at the behest of the agency.
CIA officials quickly discover that Mohamed has betrayed them. The agency declares it has terminated its relationship with him. The US State Department also adds Mohamed's name to a watch list as a suspected terrorist. But Zawahiri has bigger plans for Mohamed. He sends him on another mission to enter the United States and keep looking for ways to infiltrate US intelligence. Even though Mohamed's name is on a watch list, the State Department issues him a visa. At the time, officials are simply not focused on terrorist threats inside the US. One news report later says that Mohamed got past the watch list with CIA help.
Did somebody close their eyes and just sign off something and give it to him? We were never able to confirm that. I think it's a function of A, not knowing what B's doing, and that he took advantage of it.
However he did it, Mohamed now heads for America, looking to exploit any weakness in security he can find.
The Indonesian island of Komodo, home to the world's largest lizard, the Komodo dragon. With serrated dagger-like teeth and a lethal concoction of venom and bacteria, this confirmed man-eater can kill in one bite. Killer dragons on National Geographic Channel HD.
A photographer and a filmmaker living in the midst of Africa's wild get a rare opportunity to track a leopard cub through its first years of life.
I don't know how anybody could put an animal like this in the sights of a gun and still sleep at night.
The making of an award-winning film, Living with Big Cats, on National Geographic Channel HD.
A bat in your bedroom, a bear in your kitchen, a raccoon in your loft, a rattlesnake in your garage, an alligator in your backyard. Animals are all around us. If they get too close for comfort in your neighborhood, who you gonna call? Animal Patrol, of course. On National Geographic Channel HD.
Vi vil forstå mere om verden i dag. Vi undersøger fortiden og prøver at beskrive fremtiden. Vi fortæller om de vigtigste emner i verden i dag. Foreviget af vores prisbelønnede fotografer. Få vores indblik sendt direkte til dig hver måned. Artikler med global perspektiv fra verdens mest kendte magasin på dansk. National Geographic. Abonner nu.
Nå får du et rålekkert stereoanlegg fra sveitsiske Geneva. Alt i en boks, kun en kabel. Nå 9495. Den perfekte julegaven. En 19-toms kvalitetsskjerm med innebygget DVD-spiller. Kun 2995. Finn din nærmeste butikk og flere gode tilbud på soundgarden.no.
Come see the beauty. The island so colorful. Come taste the best. People so friendly for your heart to feel and see. La Formosa, Taiwan will touch your heart. Taiwan will touch your heart.
It is so intense, it is actually frightening.
I didn't realize that zebras were so vicious.
This was a very emotional and traumatic thing.
If it would have been 5 minutes later, we wouldn't have got it. We would have missed it.
Nature doesn't play by any rules, and it often puts the unsuspecting amateur right in the right place, and they get these amazing moments.
What unfolded was just amazing.
Caught in the Act premieres on National Geographic Channel HD.
4 golden rules to be a perfect carnivore. First, wait for the right moment. Second, choose the right prey. Chase it. And fourth, catch it. As often as required. Ah, the pleasures of the flesh. Planet Carnivore on National Geographic HD.
New York City, September the 6th, 1985. As Ali Mohamed's plane touches down at Kennedy Airport, he has already made his first US conquest. On the plane, the good-looking 33-year-old bachelor caught the eye of a woman from California who was heading home from a vacation in Greece. Ali follows up their meeting with a series of calls, and after a 6-week courtship, they are married at the Chapel of the Bells in Reno, Nevada. Mohamed moves into his bride's duplex here in Santa Clara, California. Her name is being withheld to protect her identity. With an American wife as his ticket, Mohamed begins to study to become a naturalized US citizen. He also contacts a friend from the Egyptian Islamic Jihad and urges him to move to California as well. The friend, Khalid Abu al-Dahab, says he wants to join the Muslim warriors who are fighting to drive the Soviets out of Afghanistan, warriors being secretly funded by the CIA. But Mohamed convinces his friend otherwise. He tells Dahab, "Come to America, but be patient. There is a bigger plan." August the 15th, 1986. Ali Mohamed shows up at this army recruiting office in Oakland, California. He says he wants to enlist. Although the Egyptian military expelled him for his radical beliefs, and although the US State Department has him on a watch list, the US Army accepts him.
There is nothing more important for a terrorist group than to have a live agent, a living agent inside a military organization such as the US military.
Mohamed sails through boot camp. At 34, he's older than most of the other recruits, but he demonstrates his physical prowess by running 3 kilometers in under 10 minutes. Mohamed makes sergeant and ends up back at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, the base where he was an exchange officer 6 years earlier. Here he takes paratrooper classes and maintains equipment for a special forces unit. He also begins searching for documents he can steal and pass on to his comrades in the Egyptian Islamic Jihad.
Those documents were varied from the actual ship docking locations of U.S. warships in the Persian Gulf to actually training manuals for special operations warfare at Fort Bragg.
In 1987, Mohamed joins his unit in Egypt for a joint US-Egyptian military exercise called Bright Star. During the desert maneuvers, the Egyptians once again warn their US colleagues that Mohamed is a dangerous radical. As a result, the US sends Mohamed back to Fort Bragg and removes him from the Special Forces unit, but he stays in the army. His new supervisor at Fort Bragg quickly becomes wary of him after a conversation about the assassination of Anwar Sadat.
I said to him, you know, Anwar Sadat was not only a hero to Egypt, but he was also a hero to the United States and the entire free world. So his response to me was, he was a traitor and he had to die. And at that point, I realized that he was a religious fanatic.
Colonel Anderson allows Mohamed to remain in his unit, despite his misgivings.
He had a, you see in the movies quite often, only this person you see firsthand, he had an air about him, a stare, a very coldness.
My name is Ali Mohamed. I'm a former Egyptian officer.
In fact, the JFK Special Warfare Center at Fort Bragg enlists Mohamed to teach seminars and join in videotaped panel discussions like this one about the Middle East. This exposes soldiers to a radical Muslim viewpoint.
We have to establish an Islamic State because Islam without political domination cannot survive.
The students felt it was unbelievable. Some of them even thought it was a joke, that nobody could be that extreme.
As long as we're talking about the war with Israel, what do you see as prospects for Mideast peace?
Mohamed fields questions from American officers and insists that Americans are blind to the Arab perspective.
The United States doesn't see what the Arabs see. The American will not listen to him because the Americans see what they want to see and hear what they want to hear.
He also expresses his hatred for Israel and his view that the Jewish state should not exist.
Nobody can recognize Israel as a right to live because Israel stole an Islamic territory. This is from Islamic perspective, and we do not accept no peace, no international conference, nothing, no compromise.
In 1988, Mohamed's 3-year tour with the army is nearing an end. He now gets ready to take his radical beliefs, as well as the skills he's learned and the intelligence he's gathered from the US military, and put them into action. And he will do so on behalf of this man, a man who is about to create a global terrorist organization called Al-Qaeda. Brooklyn, New York, 1988. US Army Sergeant Ali Mohamed makes a call to this storefront mosque. Inside the mosque, a fellow radical Egyptian runs a recruitment center for Muslims who want to fight the Soviets in Afghanistan. The center is called Al-Kifa, Arabic for the struggle. It's the flagship of a network of such centers in major cities around the world. The Egyptian, Mustafa Shalabi, also raises tens of thousands of dollars to support the Afghan resistance fighters known as Mujahideen. Shalabi conveys a request to Mohammed from the resistance leaders. They want him to come to Afghanistan and train their holy warriors. At Fort Bragg, Ali Mohamed meets with his supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel Anderson. He tells Anderson he plans to use his army leave to go to Afghanistan, join the Mujahideen, and fight the Soviets.
I said, look, I don't know who you think you are, but you can't go around the world thinking that the United States Army is going to like that, because there's no telling how much trouble that you could put the United States in as a member of the United States Army going around killing Russians.
Mohammed is nothing if not audacious. He uses his leave to go to Afghanistan anyway, in a flagrant violation of army rules. Peshawar, Pakistan. Mohammed journeys to this bustling town on the border with Afghanistan, where the CIA is running a covert operation to supply weapons to the Mujahideen. From here, Mohammed enters the war zone. Also aiding the Mujahideen from his base in Peshawar is the 17th son of a construction billionaire from Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Laden. 31-year-old bin Laden is funneling money to the rebels from Arab donors. Joining forces with bin Laden is Ali Mohammed's mentor, and now a top leader of the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. Fort Bragg, North Carolina. A month after he left for Afghanistan, Ali Mohammed returns here, 11 kilograms lighter and brandishing a war trophy.
And then he came back and gave us a debriefing with maps, and even brought back this Russian Special Forces belt. He said that he'd killed the Russian Special Forces soldier.
Colonel Anderson says he sent 2 separate reports to his superiors criticizing Ali Mohammed for his Afghan adventure. But he received no response, and Anderson says he did not have enough evidence to bring charges against Mohammed. By the end of 1988, Afghan forces, with the CIA's help, have driven the Soviets out. The war comes to an end. Bin Laden, determined to wage a global jihad, needs to expand his organization to support the next step in his master plan. He forms the base, in Arabic, Al-Qaeda. In the coming year, bin Laden will take over the worldwide fundraising network of Al-Kifa centers, including Shalabi's office in Brooklyn. And at the center of bin Laden's plans to infiltrate the US will be none other than US Army Sergeant Ali Mohamed. Cliffside Park, New Jersey. Spring, 1989. Mohammed visits this house, the home of a fellow Egyptian and air conditioning repairman named El Sayed Nosser. Mohammed has agreed to train Nosser and a few other men in paramilitary and surveillance tactics. Some of the men fought in the Soviet-Afghan War, and they all belong to the Al Farouk Mosque in Brooklyn. The training is part of Mohammed's fierce dedication to his terrorist mission in the US. It's a mission still guided by Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, now a trusted aide to bin Laden. These men will become one of the first Islamic terror cells in America.
Ali Mohamed not only served the Egyptian Islamic Jihad, but served Al-Qaeda from the very beginning of his association with Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri.
Mohammed's dedication is based on his radical Muslim beliefs, the same beliefs he had shared with his army colleagues at Fort Bragg.
You have one line, you accept the one line or not. So the word of fundamentalist means that I accept everything and this is my way.
At Nasser's house, Mohammed hides military documents he's stolen from Fort Bragg. He also gives lectures in Jersey City, New Jersey, in a room below the Al-Salam Mosque. Insiders call this room the Jihad Office. Mohammed stocks the office with copies of his Fort Bragg training manuals, including instructions on how to build booby traps and bombs. As part of his terrorist curriculum, Mohammed teaches his students to communicate using so-called dead mail drops, private P.O. boxes located at an inconspicuous location. This tactic allows terrorists to communicate anonymously. El Sayed Nasser and his fellow terrorists in training get mailboxes at the Sphinx Trading Company, housed in the very same building as the mosque. Brooklyn, New York, summer 1989. Over 4 consecutive weekends, a convoy of cars leaves the Al Farouk Mosque. A surveillance team tails them. After receiving a tip about a possible bomb threat, the FBI and New York police are investigating Mustafa Shalabi and his recruitment center. The convoy drives 120 kilometers east to Long Island. It stops here at a firing range in the town of Calverton. An FBI photographer parks at a distance and snaps these pictures. El Sayed Nasser and his comrades produce an array of semi-automatic weapons, including AK-47 assault rifles. The 5 men, all trained by Ali Mohamed, spend hours firing their weapons. After a month, the bomb plot never materializes. The surveillance ends, and the authorities make no arrests. The men have not broken any law, and at the time, terrorism is not the top priority for U.S. law enforcement.
That was something that happened overseas. There was no undercovers, there was no wiretaps. The ability to do that against a religious organization would have been incredibly difficult.
Autumn 1989. Ali Mohamed finishes his 3-year tour at Fort Bragg. Even though his name has been on a watch list, he is sworn in as a U.S. citizen. Now 37 years old, Mohammed returns home to his wife in Santa Clara, California. He begins to work on an assignment that reflects the growing ambition of Osama bin Laden, building a terror cell on the West Coast. Mohammed's friend Khalid Abu al-Dahab has now entered the US from Egypt on a student visa and settles into an apartment near Mohammed's house. The men convert Dahab's apartment into a terrorist communication hub. They patch through calls between their native Egypt and terrorist cells around the world. New York City, July 1990. The Egyptian cleric widely known for issuing the decree to murder Anwar Sadat arrives at Kennedy Airport. The so-called blind sheikh Omar Abdul Rahman is on a State Department list of suspected terrorists, but like Ali Mohamed, he has somehow received a US visa. The sheikh is one of the most prominent leaders in the world of radical Islam, and now an ally of Al-Qaeda. His presence in America is both an opportunity for bin Laden to spread his influence and a call to action for the terrorists trained by Ali Mohamed.
This was a major league ball player in what at the time was a minor league ballpark. His arrival into this country legitimized the people at the Farouk Mosque.
The blind sheikh gets an apartment here in Brooklyn's Bay Ridge neighborhood. It's rumored that bin Laden is covering his living expenses. the blind sheikh begins preaching at the Al Farouk Mosque. He declares holy war on the US and calls for Islam to rule the world. His fiery rhetoric galvanizes the militants at Al Farouk, including 34-year-old El Sayed Nasser. Nasser is now ready to put what he learned from Ali Mohamed into action. He will take aim at a well-known enemy of the Arab world. November the 5th, 1990. El Sayed Nasser enters this hotel in Midtown Manhattan, disguised as an observant Jew. In a ballroom, Rabbi Meir Kahane, founder of the Radical Jewish Defense League, has just finished giving a speech. Kahane advocates the expulsion of Arabs from Israel. Nasser approaches the rabbi and pulls out a .357 Magnum revolver. He pumps a shot at close range into the rabbi. Kahane is killed. Nasser flees the hotel, but minutes later, after a shootout in the street, he's arrested by police. The next night in Cliffside Park, New Jersey, the FBI and local police seize more than a dozen boxes of evidence from Nasser's house. The boxes contain some classified military documents that Ali Mohamed stole from Fort Bragg, as well as audio tapes of the blind sheikh calling for terrorist attacks in America.
There was a treasure trove of connections to terrorist groups. Unfortunately, most of it was not exploited or even looked at the time of Nasser being arrested.
The Manhattan DA's office prosecutes Nasser as a lone gunman, not as part of a conspiracy.
In that environment, when there wasn't the perception of a larger terrorist Islamic threat to the United States, we didn't conceive of them being capable of carrying out a conspiracy to ultimately harm the American public.
Near San Francisco, California, 1990.
Yes.
Ali Mohamed meets with an FBI agent. It's the next step in his mission, now directed by the evolving Al-Qaeda leadership in Afghanistan. Mohamed offers his services as a translator. During the interview, he tosses out some raw intelligence to prove his worth. As a result of this, the FBI ends up using him not as a translator, but as an informant. One of Mohamed's assignments will be to infiltrate this mosque in Santa Clara, run by a group of radical Palestinians. Just as he did with the CIA in Germany, Mohamed exposes the operation and reveals himself as an FBI plant. But at the time, the FBI does not discover the betrayal. Brooklyn, New York, February 1991. The blind sheikh gives speeches denouncing his fellow Egyptian, Mustafa Shalabi, who runs the recruitment center at the Brooklyn Mosque. Both men are allies of bin Laden, but they disagree on how to use the money that Shalabi has raised for the Afghan jihad. Shalabi wants to use it for charity, but the blind sheikh wants to use the money for terrorism. Bin Laden wants to strike back at the US in the wake of the Gulf War. He is incensed that the US has established bases in his native Saudi Arabia, the Holy Land of Mecca and Medina. The blind sheikh's attacks continue. Shalabi decides that he and his wife should travel home to Egypt. On the day that Shalabi's wife is heading to the airport, Ali Mohamed happens to be in New York. He gives her a lift. March the 1st, 1991. A neighbor in Shalabi's Coney Island apartment building notices his door is open. Inside, Shalabi is lying in a pool of blood. He's been stabbed, shot, and strangled, and the apartment has been ransacked. Police suspect the blind sheikh is behind the murder, but they find no physical evidence that connects anyone to the crime, and there are no arrests. According to terrorism expert Steve Emerson, the reason for this may have been Ali Mohamed. He allegedly received an assignment from the blind sheikh's terror cell.
After the killing, he was brought in to clean up the apartment and to make sure that nobody who was involved in the killing could ever be found. That murder was never solved to this day.
With Chalabi out of the way, the blind sheikh takes over the Al-Khifa Center. He allows an Al-Qaeda associate from Texas, a 30-year-old Lebanese-American named Wadi al-Hajj, to manage it briefly. Osama bin Laden now has a loyal outpost in New York City. And though the FBI does not yet realize it, there is a terror cell operating there with links to bin Laden, the blind sheikh, and Ali Mohamed. Mohamed is now ready to take on ambitious assignments for Al-Qaeda around the world as the terror organization grows into a global threat. Peshawar, Pakistan, late 1991. At this city near the Afghan border, Ali Mohamed is carrying out a major assignment for Al-Qaeda, helping Osama bin Laden move to a new base of operations. Bin Laden has enemies everywhere and needs a personal security force. Mohammed's wife back in California believes he is just away on another business trip. Bin Laden has so much faith in Mohammed that he entrusts him with coordinating the dangerous move and protecting him from attack. They cover 1,600 kilometers by car, sometimes putting bin Laden in disguise. They deliver him to Karachi, Pakistan, where his private jet is waiting. From Karachi, bin Laden travels to Khartoum in Sudan, where the radical Islamic government has agreed to protect him and about 500 of his followers. This becomes bin Laden's new headquarters. New York City, December 1991. Bin Laden helps achieve a victory in an American courtroom. The Al-Qaeda leader contributes $20,000 to a defense fund for Egyptian El Sayed Nasser, charged with the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane. Renowned defense attorney William Kunstler represents Nasser and convinces the jury to find him guilty only of the gun and assault charges. Attending a celebration party the following night in this Brooklyn mosque is this ex-Egyptian military officer Imad Salem. But unlike Ali Mohamed, he despises the blind sheikh for his role in the Sadat murder. Salem has made a deal with the FBI and agreed to go undercover as a mole to try and expose the blind sheikh's terror cell for $500 a week.
He had posed himself as a bomb maker. In fact, he really had no bomb making knowledge at all. But again, he played the role well. He made himself invaluable to the sheikh.
Within weeks, as seen in this news footage, Salem is serving occasionally as the blind sheikh's bodyguard and accompanying him on fundraising trips. Host, Afghanistan. September 1992. Ali Mohamed is at an outpost in the mountains near the Pakistani border. It is home to an international university of terrorists, sponsored by bin Laden. Hundreds of applicants from more than 50 countries worldwide converge here to attend a boot camp. Mohamed is one of the instructors, and he's known as an especially demanding teacher. He drills his students in hand-to-hand combat and explosives. They rehearse for kidnappings and assassinations. They practice surveillance of bombing targets, and they learn to organize a terror cell. Mohamed spends months at a time training Al-Qaeda foot soldiers both in Afghanistan and in Sudan.
The success of any terrorist attack depends on two things. One is surveillance and reconnaissance of the future intended target. Second is rehearsal. Ali Mohamed introduced these two concepts to Al-Qaeda.
Mohamed draws on his experience as a security consultant for Egypt Air to teach his students how to hijack a plane. He explains where the hijackers should position themselves in the cabin and how to smuggle utility knives on board.
Did they have the FAA manual as to what would allow them to put on the airplane, what you could bring on an airplane in terms of knives and other stuff? The answer is yes.
Ali Mohamed is so confident of his ability to operate under the radar that he pulls off yet another audacious infiltration, this time to help raise money to pay for terrorist operations. Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri is now one of bin Laden's closest advisors. With Ali Mohamed's help, Zawahiri enters the US under an alias, using a fake passport provided by Mohammed. Mohammed accompanies him on a fundraising tour of mosques on the West Coast. The men claim to be raising money for Red Crescent, the Islamic relief organization. New York City, autumn 1992. FBI mole Imad Salem uncovers valuable intelligence about the blind sheikh and his connections to terrorism. The FBI decides that Salem now has to wear a wire or hidden bugging device to record his conversations with the terrorists who were linked to the blind sheikh. But Salem refuses.
He didn't want to wear a wire because Sheikh Rahman was an important jihad figure in the world. If he turned against any one of their groups, would have to worry about his family at home.
Salem's refusal to wear a wire makes some FBI officials begin to question his credibility.
There was a discussion in the office because he wasn't wearing the wire, maybe he wasn't telling the truth. So he was dismissed.
The FBI has now lost its eyes and ears inside the blind sheikh's Brooklyn cell, and the blind sheikh has lost the man he thinks is a bomb maker. But soon another bomb maker, this time a real one, will be on his way to New York. Ramzi Youssef will team up with members of the blind sheikh's terror cell, men trained by Ali Mohamed, and pull off the first major act of Islamic terrorism on US soil. By 1992, former US Army Sergeant Ali Mohamed is playing a critical part in the growth of Al-Qaeda. One long-term project in particular has widespread impact. Mohamed creates a training manual that bin Laden distributes to his troops worldwide. In writing it, the former US Army Sergeant makes ample use of the documents that he stole from Fort Bragg.
Ali Mohamed created a body of knowledge that would help Al-Qaeda's transformation from guerrilla force into an urban terrorist organization.
Using this curriculum, Mohamed conducts seminars at Al-Qaeda training camps on everything from assassinations to surveillance. Bin Laden himself takes one of his classes, and Mohamed is so confident in his relationship with bin Laden that when the time comes to give out grades, he gives the Al-Qaeda leader a C. September the 1st, 1992. A flight arrives at New York's Kennedy Airport from Pakistan, carrying Ramzi Youssef, a bomb-building genius with a dozen aliases. Using a fake Iraqi passport, he tries to convince US immigration officers that he's a refugee. The INS detains Youssef, but then, due to a lack of beds at this INS holding facility, releases him. The INS does find a bed, however, for Youssef's traveling companion. In his suitcase, officials discovered terrorist manuals, as well as US military training manuals from Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Both Youssef and his companion received training in terror camps at around the same time that Ali Mohamed was teaching in Afghanistan. Youssef heads immediately for the Al-Khifa Center in Brooklyn, the home of the terror cell now led by the blind sheikh and trained by Ali Mohamed. Youssef soon begins working out of this storage facility in Jersey City, New Jersey. He buys fertilizer and fuel oil to build a 680-kilogram bomb that he hopes will destroy the World Trade Center. 3 of his co-conspirators were trained by Ali Mohamed and photographed by the FBI 3 years earlier at a firing range on Long Island. February the 26th, 1993. Ramzi Youssef and 3 other cell members load their 680-kilogram bomb into a yellow Ryder van. They park it on the B2 level beneath the Twin Towers. 12:17 p.m. Youssef's bomb detonates. It creates a 7-story crater, kills 6 people, and injures 1,000 more. But Youssef has failed. The bomb is not powerful enough, and the towers remain standing. Ramzi Youssef flees the country, frustrated, but still determined to bring down this symbol of America's global might. Vancouver, British Columbia, June 1993. 4 months after the World Trade Center bombing, Ali Mohamed is waiting at the airport to pick up an old colleague. The colleague is a 24-year-old fellow Egyptian named Issam Marzouk, one of the men who helped Mohammed move Osama bin Laden out of Afghanistan 2 years earlier. But Marzouk falls foul of the Canadian customs officials. When he tries to slip through using a fake Saudi passport, they arrest him. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police take Marzouk into custody. They also quickly detain Ali Mohamed and question him for hours. Finally, Mohammed gives the Mounties a phone number and asks them to call it. The person who answers the phone vouches for Mohammed. It's his FBI control agent in San Francisco.
Ali Mohamed calls the FBI, and the FBI intervenes to some extent. I don't think you have to be an agent who has worked, terrorism all their life to realize something is terribly amiss here.
With the FBI agent's blessing, the Mounties release Ali Mohamed. When he returns to the US, the FBI takes no action against him. But Mohammed's FBI handler does follow up by conducting an interview with him in San Francisco. Mohammed explains that a man named Osama bin Laden runs an organization called Al-Qaeda. He says bin Laden wants to overthrow the Saudi government. He admits to the agent that he has been to Afghanistan and taught at bin Laden's training camps there. He says the subjects included intelligence and hijacking. The FBI agent notifies his superiors in Washington.
To his credit, says, this is a little bit out of my league, so I think I ought to get somebody out here who are a specialist on this. So he contacts FBI headquarters.
The FBI puts in a request for someone with the right kind of expertise in the US military to interview Mohammed. The Pentagon decides to send officers from Fort Meade, Maryland, headquarters of the National Security Agency.
Out from Fort Meade comes military officers who are traveling in the black. In other words, they've got false IDs and everything, covering up who they are.
The intelligence officers debrief Mohammed. An FBI agent would later try to find out what Mohammed had told these top-secret officials about bin Laden and his training camps. The Pentagon told him the reports had probably been destroyed.
Ali Mohamed knew how to exploit the system perfectly and to play off one branch of an agency, such as the FBI, against another. He had provided just enough details of Al-Qaeda to be considered an asset, but not enough that would result in him being suspected as a key player in the organization itself.
Within the FBI, officials later acknowledge there is not enough communication between agents in different cities. As a result, counter-terrorism officials in New York do not learn about Ali Mohamed's admission that he visited bin Laden's training camps.
Back during that time period, there didn't seem a coordinated group, let me put it this way. You had pockets of people in different places. We didn't have the opportunity to say that, things that were going on in New York had a relationship to California.
In the months after the World Trade Center bombing, the FBI and Justice Department are playing catch-up. The investigation shows links to the blind sheikh. The pressure is on to do something about him. FBI officials decide the best way to gather evidence on the blind sheikh is to bring back their Egyptian informant, Imad Salem, the man they dismissed 6 months earlier because he wouldn't wear a wire. But this time, instead of $500 a week, they agree to pay him $1 million. At the time, Mary Jo White is the new U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
You've got to think, who is going to be able to infiltrate a group of terrorists like these? It's not going to be your, FBI agent with the, the short haircut and the button-down collar. It ain't going to work.
Salem goes back undercover as a supposed bomb maker for the blind sheikh's terror cell. In this surveillance video, Salem and members of the cell mix materials for bombs. The men are planning to use bombs to blow up New York City bridges and tunnels, as well as the headquarters of the United Nations.
It permitted, uniquely and rarely, for the FBI to get inside one of these plots. A group of extremist Islamists wanted us destroyed, basically, declared war on us. America's the great Satan.
The FBI and New York police do not yet have enough evidence to arrest the blind sheikh in connection with the bomb plot. But INS officials try to arrest him as an illegal immigrant. He takes refuge inside this mosque, one of 3 he controls in the New York area. It's a place of worship where he believes authorities will be unwilling to arrest him. July the 2nd, 1993. Authorities collaborate and eventually take the blind sheikh into custody, not for the bombing plot, but on immigration charges. He is later indicted in the bridge and tunnel scheme, what becomes known as the Day of Terror plot. Law enforcement is finally starting to connect some of the dots.
I can't emphasize enough how excruciatingly difficult and novel a lot of these issues were. You always look back and think, what could I have done differently? I mean, you'll never know the answer to that, but you certainly second-guess yourself constantly.
The FBI's San Francisco office has by now established that Ali Mohamed is connected to bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. But the Bureau lets him remain free to pursue his next and most violent mission for Al-Qaeda. Khartoum, Sudan, 1993. Ali Mohamed carries out an unprecedented assignment for Osama bin Laden. He makes arrangements for a summit between bin Laden, a Sunni Muslim, and Imad Mughniya, one of the top leaders of Hezbollah, a Shiite Muslim terrorist group funded by Iran. Sunni and Shiite extremists are bitter rivals, but bin Laden puts this aside to unite with Hezbollah against their common enemy, the United States. Mohammed had met with Hezbollah operatives a decade earlier, when the CIA sent him on a mission to Germany. He now uses his contacts to bring Mughniya to bin Laden's headquarters in Sudan.
Imad Mughniya told bin Laden the importance of conducting coordinated, simultaneous suicide attacks. So in many ways, the transfer of that critical knowledge from Lebanese Hezbollah into Al-Qaeda was accomplished as a result of a meeting that was arranged by Ali Mohamed.
Following the summit, Al-Qaeda fighters travel to Lebanon for advanced explosives training with Hezbollah. They will use what they learn here on their next battlefield, in East Africa. Mogadishu, Somalia. October 1993. U.S. Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Delta Force commandos are working to keep the population here from starving in Operation Restore Hope. But a local warlord is stealing food supplied by the UN. Osama bin Laden, enraged at the presence of U.S. troops in Africa, dispatches a group of Al-Qaeda operatives to assist the local warlords. The man who has trained some of the Al-Qaeda fighters is none other than Ali Mohamed, the 41-year-old U.S. Army veteran who had served at Fort Bragg alongside Delta Force troops. On the afternoon of October the 3rd, Black Hawk helicopters go on a mission to snatch two of the local warlord's top aides. Suddenly, rocket-propelled grenades roar up. They take down one Black Hawk, and then a second. Rescue efforts lead to a 14-hour street battle. 18 US soldiers are killed and more than 70 wounded. Within days, President Clinton announces that he's pulling US troops out of Somalia. Bin Laden claims a victory, believing the Americans have no stomach for war. Nairobi, Kenya. December 1993. Ali Mohamed arrives to work with a terror cell that Bin Laden has established. His cover is that he works in diamonds and leather. One of his associates is Lebanese-American Wadi El-Hajj, the same man who briefly managed the Al-Kifa Center in Brooklyn. An Al-Qaeda operative, El-Hajj now serves as Bin Laden's personal secretary. Here in Nairobi, he's created a charity organization called Help Africa People. He uses it to obtain identity papers for the other cell members. The men address each other by code names. Ali Mohamed uses the name Jeff. Wadi El-Hajj goes by Norman. Their code for the FBI is the food and beverage industry. One of Mohammed's assignments is to survey a series of American and Western bomb targets in Kenya. He takes photos of buildings, including the French and US embassies. He also photographs British and Israeli targets. Khartoum, Sudan, sometime between 1993 and 1994. Ali Mohamed meets with Bin Laden and other top Al-Qaeda leaders. He shows them his surveillance on bomb targets in Nairobi. Bin Laden studies Mohammed's photo of the US embassy carefully. He then points to the exact spot where a truck bomb should go. A plot is now set in motion. It will be developed over the next 4 years. Bin Laden also hires Mohammed for another, more personal assignment. The Al-Qaeda leader has recently survived an assassination attempt, and he needs someone to train his security forces. Mohammed shares his expertise, including what he learned at Fort Bragg, with Bin Laden's bodyguards. Mohammed is now a trusted advisor and master spy for Bin Laden, deeply committed to the global jihad. As the former US Army sergeant explained years earlier to his colleagues at Fort Bragg, in his mind, the holy war is at the heart of Islam.
Everybody, when he hear fundamentalists, he think about armed struggle, he think about radicals. Actually, if you look at the religion, we do not have moderate. You have one line, you accept the one line or not.
Meanwhile, another man following techniques introduced to Al-Qaeda by Ali Mohamed is plotting his next move. When Ramzi Yousef's bomb failed to bring down the World Trade Center in 1993, he began work on a far more ambitious scheme. This time, the Trade Center would not be attacked from below. Nairobi, Kenya, late 1994. Former US Army Sergeant Ali Mohamed has become a powerful hidden asset for Al-Qaeda. He's infiltrated US intelligence and trained Al-Qaeda troops. He trained cell members who carried out the World Trade Center truck bombing. And he conducted surveillance for a plot that's being developed to attack US embassies in East Africa. All of this out of devotion to radical Islam.
As a Muslim, I have obligation to establish the Islamic law. It's obligation. It's not a choice.
Mohammed now meets in Nairobi with Al-Qaeda's military commander Mohammed Atef and another member of the Al-Qaeda cell based there. Atef tells the men he wants to expand their possible bomb targets. He orders Mohammed to conduct more surveillance of American and British locations. Within days of this meeting, Mohammed receives a message from his wife. The FBI wants to talk to him immediately. The Bureau wants to know why Mohammed's name has appeared on a list of potential defense witnesses for a major terrorism trial about to begin in New York City. The blind sheikh, Omar Abdul Rahman, and 11 of his followers face charges in the so-called Day of Terror plot to blow up New York bridges and tunnels. Ali Mohamed, still determined to play the part of an FBI informant, decides to honor the Bureau's request for an interview. His fellow terrorists in Nairobi give him the money for the flight back to America. He's about to come face to face with the FBI, and those he continues to betray.
I think he was willing to walk that high wire act. I think that was Ali's decision. And he'd been doing it for how long now? So why not keep up with the charade?
Mohammed's name came up in connection with the Day of Terror trial because one of the defendants is fellow Egyptian terrorist El Sayed Nasser. Nasser is already serving time on gun and assault charges at Attica State Prison. His defense attorneys traced the military documents found in Nasser's New Jersey house back to Fort Bragg and Ali Mohamed. To fight these new charges in the Day of Terror plot, Nasser's attorney wants Ali Mohamed to be a key witness.
I wanted anything that had to do with Ali Mohamed because Ali Mohamed was helping the defendants at the same time as he's in the U.S. Army.
The defense wants Mohamed to help make the case to the jury that defendants like Nasser are not guilty because they, like Mohamed, were working on the same side as the U.S. government as far back as the Soviet-Afghan War. Manila, the Philippines, 1994. The mastermind of the World Trade Center truck bombing, Ramzi Youssef, is in hiding. Ali Mohamed trained some of the men who worked with Youssef to execute that bombing. Youssef is now plotting more terror attacks. He sets up a terror cell with Abdul Hakim Murad, an old friend and pilot trained in 4 U.S. flight schools. Another member of the cell is Youssef's uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Together, they are working on a plot to blow up jumbo jets headed for the U.S. from Asia. The men also begin work on an ambitious suicide plot. The idea is to use aeroplanes as missiles and fly them into landmark American buildings such as the CIA headquarters and the Pentagon. San Jose, California, December 1994. In response to the FBI's request, Ali Mohamed returns to the U.S. from Kenya. He meets with an FBI agent and an assistant U.S. attorney. They ask him to explain what he's been doing and his connections, if any, to the blind sheikh. Mohamed claims he is just working in the scuba diving business in Kenya. He admits he helped Osama bin Laden move out of Afghanistan back in 1991, and he also admits he traveled to Pakistan during the Afghan war, but only, he says, as an observer. As prosecutors and defense attorneys haggle over evidence and witnesses for the Day of Terror trial, Ali Mohamed becomes a highly sensitive subject. In the end, the government makes a concession to the defense. It will acknowledge in open court the role of the U.S. in aiding the rebels in Afghanistan. But it seems prosecutors do not want Ali Mohamed to testify. The defense has a theory as to why.
It was my view that the government did not want Ali Mohamed to testify and that they would do anything in order to prevent that from happening. The reason why the government didn't want Ali Mohamed to come to trial, which became clear with the benefit of hindsight, was that he was an operative and he was working through various intelligence agencies.
Mohammed phones his fellow terrorists in Nairobi. They instruct him to stay in the US. The Al-Qaeda operatives want Mohammed to find out what, if anything, US authorities know about them. The Day of Terror trial begins in New York. Mohammed obtains a copy of this list of 172 unindicted co-conspirators. Osama bin Laden's name is on it, and so is his own. He sends the list to Nairobi with instructions to forward it to bin Laden, so the Al-Qaeda leader will know he is now on the radar of US law enforcement. Santa Clara, California, January 1995. Back in the Silicon Valley, Ali Mohamed gets a job as a guard for a private security firm called Burns International Security Service. He is assigned to a defense contractor, Northrop Grumman, at a facility that makes components for Trident nuclear submarines. Mohammed submits to a background check by the US Defense Department so he can gain access to classified areas at the facility. Mohammed lies, telling investigators that he's been traveling around the Middle East and Africa in the leather goods business. He fails the background check.
Well, they didn't give him a security clearance, which is a good thing.
Mohammed then decides to leave the private security company and finds a new job as a computer consultant. Islamabad, Pakistan. February 1995. In this Al-Qaeda safe house, US and Pakistani authorities seized the mastermind of the World Trade Center truck bombing, Ramzi Yusuf. Yusuf's uncle, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, known to investigators as KSM, is also staying here, but authorities do not identify him as part of the terror cell. FBI agents take Yusuf into custody. KSM, who will become known as the mastermind behind 9/11, disappears. The FBI brings Yusuf back to the US. They transport him by helicopter to a Manhattan jail. The pilot passes by the World Trade Center, and Yusuf is forced to see the building he tried to destroy. As he heads to prison, Al-Qaeda will move forward with his plan to use planes as missiles. November 1995. A car filled with explosives crashes through the front gates of the Egyptian embassy in Islamabad and detonates. It blows apart the face of the compound. The blast kills 17 people and wounds 60 more. Ali Mohammed's mentor and bin Laden's right-hand man, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri, authorized the suicide attack in response to the Egyptian government's crackdown on Muslim radicals. Mohammed helped Zawahiri raise money in the US that was allegedly used to help finance the bombing. January the 17th, 1996. A federal judge in New York delivers long prison sentences to the blind sheikh, El Sayed Nasser, and 8 others found guilty in the Day of Terror plot. Surveillance video of the plot, made with the cooperation of the FBI's mole, Imad Salem, helped to convince the jury.
This jury was paying attention, they listened to the tapes, they followed the key evidence, and the key evidence against the sheikh was on tape.
US authorities are just beginning to establish ties between the blind sheikh and Osama bin Laden. They don't know it yet, but their own source and former US Army Sergeant Ali Mohamed is the living evidence of that connection. Langley, Virginia, January 1996. Osama bin Laden is now on the radar screen of US intelligence. CIA officers in Sudan have uncovered evidence that he is funding a wide array of terrorist plots. The agency establishes a special unit to investigate the Al-Qaeda leader. The FBI and the Justice Department team up with the CIA to build a criminal case against bin Laden. As part of the investigation, FBI Special Agent Jack Clunan takes on the case of Ali Mohamed. It's the first time the FBI has taken a long, hard look at the former US Army sergeant they now know to have a connection to bin Laden.
These people, particularly Ali, were within reach, so let's go out and try to gain their cooperation and see what we can find out.
Santa Clara, California. Mohammed receives a call from a fellow terrorist in Britain who needs some help. He flies to London to conduct terror training. The men do mock surveillance runs at a shopping mall, in the underground, and on bridges. Around this time, Mohammed also receives a phone call from his mentor and bin Laden's close advisor, Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri. Zawahiri asks Mohammed to conduct surveillance and gather information on US Army troop movements in Saudi Arabia. But this time, Mohammed declines.
I think he was beginning to think, enough is enough. I do believe that Ali was trying to build another life for himself. But somehow he's always being brought back into it. I mean, at his basic core, he believed in jihad.
Dhahran, Saudi Arabia. June the 25th, 1996. A truck bomb loaded with almost 2,500 kilograms of explosives detonates outside the Khobar Towers military complex. It kills 19 US servicemen from a fighter wing responsible for enforcing the no-fly zone in southern Iraq. Hundreds more are wounded.
The cowards who committed this murderous act must not go unpunished.
The FBI collects evidence showing that Hezbollah executed the attack, and Al-Qaeda operatives may have helped Hezbollah carry it out. If Al-Qaeda and Hezbollah have formed an alliance, then Ali Mohammed's key role in their summit helped forge the first critical link. Unaware of Mohammed's role within Al-Qaeda, the FBI and CIA are now trying to learn what they can about the organization. In Nairobi, they place a wiretap in the home of Wadi El-Hajj, the Lebanese American who has been building a terror cell with Ali Mohammed. Based in part on the wiretap, an FBI agent searches El-Hajj's house in August 1997. He confiscates a laptop computer and address books. His files contain phone numbers for both Osama bin Laden and Ali Mohammed. El-Hajj, a US citizen, rushes home to Texas, but during a flight change in New York, he is grabbed by FBI agents. Federal prosecutors bring the Al-Qaeda operative before a grand jury. He denies any terrorist involvement. Without enough evidence to charge him, they release him. Sacramento, California. Autumn, 1997. FBI agents, along with Assistant U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald, arrange a dinner date with Ali Mohammed at this hotel across from the state capitol. By now, they've concluded that Mohammed is playing a role within Al-Qaeda. They try to convince him to cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. Mohammed expresses no interest in a deal or in dinner, but the encounter makes him realize that his time is running out.
He's looked at us very brazenly and said, I can get out any time, you'll never find me. I got travel documents, I got false documents, I've got a whole network, you'll never find me.
Over the course of the meeting, Mohammed is bold enough to admit that he trained bin Laden's bodyguards and lived at his house in Sudan for a time. He says that bin Laden's people are responsible for killing American soldiers in Somalia. He tells his dinner companions that he loves bin Laden and that there's no need for a fatwa to attack the United States because the US is the enemy. He makes a powerful impression on the law enforcement officials, including Patrick Fitzgerald, a prosecutor known for taking on violent drug traffickers and mobsters.
That night, Pat Fitzgerald looked at me and said, "This is the most dangerous man I have ever met." When you started to look back historically at what the FBI had amassed on Ali Mohammed, you start hearing that old theory, connect the dots. something starts to add up and say, you know, why haven't we looked at this guy sooner?
After the dinner, the FBI agents allow Mohamed to remain free because they have nothing to charge him with. But they begin secretly recording their phone calls with him. They also gain access to Mohamed's bank records and begin the time-consuming business of getting court approval for a wiretap on Mohamed's apartment in Sacramento. Mohamed is now aware that US authorities view him with suspicion. But he continues to play the game and offer bits and pieces of intelligence. In one recorded phone call with an FBI agent, Mohamed even refers to a possible bomb target in East Africa. Given that it's a vague reference, the FBI takes no action based on the comment. But the Al-Qaeda plot that Mohamed spearheaded in Africa 4 years earlier is in fact about to come to fruition. Nairobi, Kenya, December 1997. Prudence Bushnell, US ambassador to Kenya, cables warnings to Washington. She conveys her fears based on US and Kenyan intelligence reports that the embassy here has been targeted for a terrorist attack. Bushnell requests funding to build a more secure embassy. The State Department denies her request. On August the 7th, 1998, shortly before 10:30 a.m., 2 men drive a cargo truck packed with TNT. They pull up to the rear gate of the US Embassy, the location that Ali Mohamed scouted and photographed for bin Laden 5 years earlier. The man in the passenger's seat jumps out. He tosses a homemade grenade at the Kenyan guards to distract them, then runs away. The grenade blast draws dozens of workers inside the embassy to their windows. Ambassador Bushnell is attending a meeting at a bank building just behind the embassy. She too hears the blast. Moments later, the truck driver detonates his cargo of dynamite. The explosion rips into the 5-story embassy. Glass shatters in every direction. The back of the building collapses. The blast also demolishes the bank building next door. Ambassador Bushnell narrowly escapes with her life. 213 people die, and another 4,000 are wounded. Just minutes later, 720 kilometers away in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, an identical bomb destroys the US Embassy. The blast kills 11 people and wounds 85 others. Bin Laden may have chosen August the 7th for these attacks because it was on this date 8 years earlier that the first US troops arrived in Saudi Arabia for Operation Desert Shield.
As soon as the East Africa Embassy bombings occurred, all of us in the Justice Department, the FBI, who were CIA, familiar with bin Laden, instantly knew it was bin Laden and Al-Qaeda.
The coordinated suicide attacks represent Al-Qaeda's most sophisticated terrorist operation to date. An attack in which Ali Mohamed played a key part by conducting surveillance of the Nairobi embassy.
Before that, Al-Qaeda had never done a big terrorist attack. And to conduct this big terrorist attack, the man who provided the critical knowledge, the know-how, was Ali Mohamed.
August the 20th, 1998. In retaliation for the embassy bombings, President Clinton orders cruise missile strikes on targets in Afghanistan and Sudan. The missile strikes fail to hit bin Laden or other Al-Qaeda leaders. The FBI still has no idea that Mohamed is involved, but it has been recording its phone calls with him. And agents now remember that in one of them, Mohamed mentioned something about a possible African target.
Ali had said something about East Africa and a bombing or a target. Here he is now, giving this up in a sense before the attack took place, and what we're saying is, oh my goodness, let's go back and take a look at that tape. Did Ali say that, he knew that the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi was going to be attacked? He didn't say that.
FBI agents decide to search Mohammed's Sacramento apartment. They seize documents that describe security arrangements at U.S. embassies. They also find materials that explain assassination techniques, how to build terror cells, and how intelligence agencies operate. The FBI now gets court approval for a wiretap on Mohammed's apartment. As agents listen in, Mohammed gets a call from a fellow terrorist in London, warning him that he should flee the US immediately. The FBI assigns agents to track Mohammed's every move.
And we now find out that he's booking travel to go to Cairo. Well, that's not going to happen. So we take him off a plane and bring him before the grand jury.
New York City, September the 10th, 1998. Ali Mohamed appears before a grand jury to answer questions about the embassy bombings. Prosecutors find discrepancies in his testimony and decide to charge him with perjury.
He had massively relevant information, but he chose not to give that information and to lie under oath, and so it presented an opportunity for us to charge him and take him out of circulation.
That night, FBI agents go to Mohammed's hotel room. Surrounded by the agents, Mohammed says he needs to use the bathroom.
After he does his business, he walks out and is just sitting there, and then they make a decision to arrest him at some point.
Mohammed will later admit that with the bathroom door closed, he took out his address book and tried to destroy evidence of his close ties to Al-Qaeda.
He ripped a page out of that had a telephone number and a safe house address for Zawahiri in Bern, Switzerland.
Authorities lock him up at this New York City jail on perjury charges. They try to keep his arrest a secret by filing the case as U.S. versus John Doe, a tactic used by prosecutors when they want a defendant to remain anonymous. But word of Mohammed's arrest leaks out, and reporters try to get U.S. Attorney Mary Jo White to explain.
Ali Mohamed was also linked to the terrorist network in some fashion as maybe a mid-level person.
I mean, I've read what you've read, but I can't comment.
In a room at this federal courthouse, FBI agents and Assistant U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald meet with Mohammed and his lawyers. They try to negotiate a plea deal, his confession to terrorist activities in return for some leniency in sentencing. But Mohammed remains loyal to Al-Qaeda.
There was some talk right away, but I would say for the first 6 to 10 months, it's all contrived. He's just spinning a story.
As Mohammed continues to lie to prosecutors, the success of the African embassy bombings inspires Osama bin Laden to approve another plot, one that's been in the works for years. A plot to use aeroplanes as missiles and fly them into landmark American buildings. New York, May the 19th, 1999. The U.S. Attorney's Office announces that a federal grand jury has indicted Ali Mohamed for conspiring with Osama bin Laden to kill Americans abroad. FBI Special Agent Jack Clunan and his colleagues step up the pressure on Mohammed. They encourage him to cut a deal and confess.
I said, "You've got very able attorneys. Have you been hurt in any way? No. Have you been treated fairly? Yes. You have to find a way out, and we're giving you a way out. I mean, do you understand that?"
By this point, Mohammed has developed a close rapport with Agent Clunan. But he's still not ready to betray Al-Qaeda and confess to terrorism because he's worried that his family back in Egypt will be persecuted. And his dedication to global jihad is also a religious one. As he explained to his army colleagues at Fort Bragg a decade earlier, his form of radical Islam is unforgiving.
In our religion, you can't renounce Islam. If you renounce Islam, you will get punishment.
While Mohammed, his lawyers, and the US authorities continue their civilized negotiations, talks of another sort are taking place in Afghanistan. Bin Laden has chosen Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, or KSM, to manage the 9/11 plot. Soon he will recruit the men who will go to America and carry it out. Autumn 1999. Back in a guarded room at this New York courthouse, Ali Mohamed, having spent more than a year fending off the US authorities, finally breaks down.
He slumped in his chair, head down, tears in his eyes, and said, "This is what I did." Yes, with Zawahiri and bin Laden's blessing, Mohammed Atteft asked me to do surveillance on the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi. Make sure that I heard that right. This is what I did. This is who I did it with. This is how I did it. And I did other things. Everything that I've told you up to this point has been a lie.
But does Mohammed tell everything that he knows? Summer 2000. Al-Qaeda's 9/11 hijackers have arrived in the US to train as pilots. Jersey City, New Jersey. Two of the leaders recruited by bin Laden, Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shehi, are seen near the Sphinx Trading Company, the same place where years earlier the blind sheikh and at least one other member of his terror cell obtained private mailboxes to communicate in secret. Ali Mohamed explained this tactic in his terror training manual, and now it's being used again. The 9/11 plot is in high gear. October the 20th, 2000. Ali Mohamed, wearing leg irons, is led before a federal judge in Manhattan. He waives his right to a jury trial and pleads guilty to conspiracy charges. Mohammed knows he's about to put his fate in the hands of the US justice system. He confesses to his role in the African embassy bombings and implicates bin Laden in the attacks. He admits to his involvement in plots to kill American soldiers in Somalia and Saudi Arabia, and US civilians anywhere in the world. He admits to training terrorists and conspiring to kidnap, murder, and maim. He states that his objective is to force Western powers out of the Middle East. Within an hour, Mohammed's court appearance is over. The judge does not pronounce a sentence. He sets a date for sentencing, but the hearing never takes place. It's an unusual scenario. Mohammed gives up his right to appeal. His defense attorneys raise no objections. Mohammed's file remains sealed. He is removed to a secret location, presumably the witness protection wing of a federal prison.
It was done by the book. Now, it's fair to say that there were mistakes made. So what was wrong with how we worked with Ali? I think the biggest thing is that we didn't catch him soon enough.
After his guilty plea, Mohammed continues to cooperate with the FBI. At the FBI's request, he even writes lengthy papers on subjects including how terrorists might attack the United Nations headquarters or US warships in the Persian Gulf. February 2001. 4 defendants go on trial in New York for the African embassy bombings, including Mohammed's friend, Lebanese-American Wadi El-Haj. Assistant U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald does not put Mohammed on the stand to testify against them. Doing so could hurt the government's case.
The idea that the cooperating witness could spin and mislead and fool and trick the FBI was not anything I think the government wanted to put before our jury.
Bottom line is that he has too much baggage. So why take the risk?
May 2001.
Today's guilty verdicts are a triumph for world justice.
The jury finds El-Haj and 3 others guilty of the African embassy bombings. All get life sentences. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., intelligence officials pick up a dizzying array of signs that terrorists are planning a major attack. By the summer of 2001, in the words of CIA Director George Tenet, the system is blinking red. Crawford, Texas, August the 6th, 2001. President George W. Bush, on vacation at his ranch, receives his daily brief prepared by the CIA. It's entitled, Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. It would appear that at least some intelligence from Ali Mohamed has made its way to the president's desk.
If you look to the 6 or 17 sentences that are in there, what I've seen, all that information came from Ali.
The president's brief says, an Egyptian Islamic Jihad operative told an unnamed service that bin Laden is planning to exploit the operative's access to the U.S. to mount a terrorist strike. Al-Qaeda members have resided in the U.S. for years. A senior EIJ member lived in California in the mid-1990s. Since his guilty plea in 2000, Ali Mohamed has been meeting with U.S. authorities and sharing details of his terrorist activities. During one such meeting, Mohamed tells the FBI about a plot to crash an airplane into the presidential palace in Cairo.
I can tell you that I personally handed a floppy disk with every one of Ali's professions to the CIA. The reaction I got was rather tepid. That's historical. The notion that the United States had nothing in its possession prior to 9/11, that Al-Qaeda had even thought about using a plane as a weapon, frankly, doesn't hold up.
September the 11th, 2001. When the towers fall, Ali Mohamed is immediately confined to his cell in the witness protection wing of an undisclosed federal prison, with no access to news reports. The following week, the FBI has him brought to this New York City jail for another interview.
So I walked in and I said, well, tell me how they did it. Now, again, I don't believe he was privy to all the details, but what he laid out was the attack as if he knew every detail of it.
Mohamed explains how the hijackers have to position themselves, some in first class, others in economy, and how they hide utility knives in their hand luggage.
It's just kind of eerie.
Did this mean that Ali Mohamed knew how and when Al-Qaeda was planning to attack the U.S.?
I think he probably understood that the World Trade Center was a target at some point, but he wouldn't have known of a plot having unfolded, because remember, he is basically was in our custody since '98.
October 2001. 1 month after the terrorist attacks, during the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan, Ali Mohamed provides information to U.S. authorities about the location of Al-Qaeda training camps. June the 16th, 2004. The 9/11 Commission holds its final hearings in Washington. In his testimony, U.S. Attorney Patrick Fitzgerald shed some light on Ali Mohamed and his deep connections to Al-Qaeda.
Ali Mohamed helped train some of the people who later carried out the World Trade Center bombing, went back to Afghanistan and helped train a lot of the top leadership in Al-Qaeda. Then he went as a U.S. citizen and surveilled a dozen targets in Nairobi in 1993.
The 9/11 Commission's final report mentions Ali Mohamed only briefly. Yet there are few figures who have had such a sweeping influence on the evolution of Al-Qaeda.
My name is Ali Mohamed. I'm a former Egyptian officer.
I would take Ali's story and I would make this the classic case study. Because the lessons you'll learn are more significant than looking at the 19 hijackers of 9/11. Understand who these people are. Understand that you can deal with them on some level, but understand that you have to respect this adversary. It's not really helpful to just put them off as some sort of wackos.
We have to establish an Islamic State.
Hey, listen, show me another person who has trained bin Laden, slept in bin Laden's office, performed an operation, surveillance operation, not only in the United States, but French, British, Israeli targets. Who did the bin Laden and Zawahiri and Mohammed Atef reach out for when there's an assassination attempt on bin Laden and they want somebody to come in and reevaluate and assess bin Laden's security? Ali Mohamed.
The bureaucratic crevices inside the FBI and certainly between the FBI, the CIA, and the Defense Department were enormous. You could drive truck bombs through them, and you could play off one against the other, but you had to be skilled. And I've never seen a terrorist with such a storied background with his connections to U.S. law enforcement and intelligence.
Islam without political domination cannot survive.
The failure to identify Mohammed as a terrorist sooner is a sobering lesson for all U.S. intelligence and law enforcement agencies.
We simply have to be more vigilant, we have to be more alert. All the time thinking how the terrorists are seeking to infiltrate us. Ali Mohammed's contribution to Al-Qaeda was seminal in the making of the current terrorist Al-Qaeda that we are seeing today.
We do not accept no peace, no international conference, nothing, no compromise.
Mohammed's name appears nowhere in the federal prison system. To this day, his legal status and his whereabouts are closely guarded secrets. His own attorneys declined to comment for this program. There is no public record that he was sentenced. By many accounts, he is still in a federal prison somewhere.
The reality is he's still being consulted as we speak today. He still has insights. His thinking has been considered very important. And so U.S. investigators, prosecutors, FBI agents still meet with him regularly. But he's not going to be leaving prison anytime soon.
But one defense lawyer in the African embassy case believes that Mohammed's value as a source of intelligence must be diminishing as the years go by.
So at some point, I assume the government will say, we have gotten everything we can and everything we need out of Ali Mohamed. I think the most likely thing that will happen is he'll be released, he'll be given a new name and a new identity, and he will pick up a life someplace.
The United States doesn't see what the Arabs see. The American will not listen to him because the Americans see what they want to see and hear what they want to hear.